Everybody, this is Chris Jerome from the Radical Independent Facebook page, and I'm here with Joseph Steagall of the Middleground Mic podcast, themiddlegroundmic.com, and he's got the YouTube page. And Joe, it's good to see you. Good to have you here.
Good to see you.
So maybe we could start off with just a little bit about your background and kind of how you got started with the show.
My background now is in management about 20 something years. I've always been a little politically active, if you want to call it that. And things had just kind of got frustrating. I've always kind of been like a back and forth, depending on the issue type of guy, because sometimes I think, left or right.
All right.
And I had voted for the president in the election before that just because I was like, I couldn't get with what people were doing. And I've voted Democrat plenty of times. And I lost a friend because I said, hey, I have a criticism over how the president handled January 6th.
Right.
Oh, you're a crazy leftist. I said, no, you can actually vote for somebody and have a problem with something that they do. I said, that's not being weird. That's actually called being an adult.
Right.
And that's what really triggered me to kind of do this.
The rigidity and certainty and the tribal emotionalism, it's like there's no room for nuance or gray or anything. It's so lockstep. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I forgot. I'm trying to think of who it was. It was a friend of mine. He's kind of in politics, but more in the background. He's really big. I won't say big, but he's prints a lot for the Democratic Party in Michigan. He runs a printing company, and I always kind of talk politics, and I mean, he's obviously pretty hard left to be where he's at, but I'm centerish right, depending on the issue. And we always get along. And so I'm like, okay, hey, da, da, da. He goes, why don't you talk to people about this? And I'm like, okay. And then, so the first 3 months, I really had no idea what I was doing. I did like a thing on the Detroit Lions because I'm from Detroit, just some things because I was really just trying to find who I was and how I wanted to approach things. Because we all have opinions, but we don't always know how to make those opinions appealable to other people. And,
Right.
If it's kind of like I always told the libertarian people, I used to be one of them, unless you have a plan to get people to your spot, your principles don't mean a whole lot because then it's just, hot air and paper. It's got to be actionable items. And so we had always kind of gotten to that. And then it started fostering, and I used a website to match up with guests. And I got a guy in there who's a Democrat running for the Missouri State House. And he calls himself a blue dog Democrat. I don't know if you remember those from the 90s. Yeah.
They're rare.
He's one of those. Yeah, he's scheduling, or not scheduling, well, I don't know about now, but he was pulling 40% in a district that went for Trump by almost 100. So, he has that appeal. And, we would just talk a lot, and he would, hey, I'm still no kings, but he also would have a reasonable, articulate response even to some democratic things.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's where I want to go with it. And then I ended up getting lucky. I had some people kind of email me, kind of stumbled across some people, and then it kind of snowballed from there. And then I started getting emails from public relations groups that had, I had a gentleman on, Adam Swart, the CEO of Crowds on Demand, largest paid protesting company in America. And let me tell you, that was, he actually came back on twice.
Nice.
And then I ended up getting Pastor Jackson, got in terrible last name's Lamer. I think that's how you say his last name. He's running for Congress right now.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. He was a close friend of Charlie Kirk's, things like that. And he actually came out 2 days after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then and around that time, like my show was already kind of starting to, like it was growing, getting better and better guests. Right. But October still to date was like my biggest month. Because in the middle of the Charlie Kirk stuff, people were looking for they were enraged, but they also wanted to make sure that they were the average person, I should say, wanted to see if they could find something. Okay, hey, how can I look into this without wanting to fight someone that I don't even know?
Right.
And I went from 70,000 downloads to 250,000 downloads in that month.
Yeah, it seems like there's a need or sort of a response out there where people. Everything's rage baity, clickbaity, partisan, polarized. And so trying to just find some decent, normal, reasonable, kind of that middle ground, I guess.
Yeah. Middle ground and centrism is actually, and you can ask any AI model and they will all tell you it is actively suppressed.
Oh,
AI won't even lie to you about it. Be like, oh, well, maybe if you didn't know, they'll go, no, it is suppressed.
Yeah.
We're open with it.
Well, I talk about that on my page, how, I talk about how we have a broken system, a corrupt rig duopoly, all that stuff, and how the incentive structure and who gets the attention in the media and all that, it all combines to create this very distorted civic landscape where the middle
Yeah.
is essentially ignored and kind of marginalized. And that's a huge aspect because I'm a nonpartisan page, right? So
Mhm.
I talk about election reforms. I talk about a lot of stuff that doesn't really matter about your ideology or your political party. These are things that like everybody could probably get behind. But I do approach things from more of the moderate centrist type of position. If you're going to have to try to stick me on like the binary simplistic sort of spectrum, because I think that's kind of the way to go. Just because we need more of that today. And it's funny too that you mentioned how when you started, you just kind of not really floundering, but just kind of figuring things out, kind of finding your way. Because I was
Oh
the
yeah.
same way with the Facebook page. I wasn't doing videos. I only started that pretty recently. But yeah, the first month, maybe two, I didn't really know where I was going with it, and
Oh
it
yeah. You're just
and
like,
it
what?
just sort of formed organically and naturally, and it just and it's actually way better that way. It just sort of
Yes.
came into its own into basically what it is now. There was no
Yeah.
preconceived, oh, I'm going to do this, I have to do this, and this is my mission, and blah blah blah. It just kind of came about, and that was
Oh
kind
yeah.
of nice.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned was is and like looking back now, I wouldn't say like one of the regrets, but one of the perspectives that I had is it's okay to be a centrist and have a right position or a left position.
Right.
And the one thing I learned is, I posted something. I'm trying to think of it. It was a short in TikTok where I was like, both sides are making this insane. I'm like, everybody calls everybody a Nazi if you're from the left. They call the right a Nazi. The left or the right calls everybody a communist.
Yeah.
I'm like, you guys are completely missing the mark of those words. First, using Nazi in this day and age,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah. We
way they
throw around
are,
terms that don't even
right?
fit. Right.
And people are like, "Oh, you don't stand for nothing. You're okay with people violating the Constitution." I'm like, "Whoa." I'm just saying we don't need to be going that far. I said, because whether you like the president or not, he's not shipping anybody off to concentration camps. They're not putting people in gas chambers. They're not doing things like that. ICE is like a whole nother thing. I'm kind of, that kind of went way off the base with ICE.
Yeah.
But the problem is people would just automatically assume, hey, if you take this position, boom, you're going far right or
Yeah.
you're going far left. And I had questioned my state senator, was to represent the state. He had posted they had bought an ICE facility around here. But, oh, I'm so outraged, this, that, and the other. I'm like, you've never once posted about ICE. They do ICE raids all the time here, even under Biden's administration. I'm like, you never once cared until you were told, because you're a Democrat, to
Hmm.
hate the president.
Right.
And I said the same thing when Biden was in office. I'm like,
Yeah.
half this stuff, like, you guys want to say it because you don't like Biden. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
Right.
You just don't like the guy, so it's an automatic no. And
There's
I
a
just,
there's a
yeah,
lot of political convenience involved, and right, just kind of
just
not
like
not
that.
necessarily on principle all the time, and
I don't
kind
know
of
if you heard about that senator from Maine. God,
maybe.
I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. I don't know. All of a sudden, but he has a tattoo. I believe it's like right around
Oh,
here.
I think I did. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, to be honest, I would not have noticed that that was a Nazi tattoo because I don't look that deep into Nazi symbolism. But if it was, and he's on the left, there ain't no way you went 20 years without knowing that, because those
Right.
folks know that stuff, through and through. And I was watching CNN, and I believe I seen a clip from The View where they were like, he's got all this bad past, he's got this, he's got the Nazi link, this, and they're like, but we need him to beat Susan Collins to control Donald Trump. And I'm like, hold up. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You were
Yeah.
saying people should be jailed for this a couple months ago.
Right.
Now you're going, it's okay. And that's when I don't like it's okay because it's my guy.
Yeah,
It
it's a
should,
team sport game, and they just kind of play the game. It's a tough space. I feel like the middle ground or centrists, it means a lot of things to a lot of people, and a lot of it's kind of negative in our really kind of polarized, environment. You're milk toast. You don't stand for anything. You're unprincipled. This and that. Just a lot of misunderstandings and stuff like that. I mean, there's all different types of centrists. Obviously, a lot of them are just have different ideas, and trying to cram everything on a simplistic line doesn't work. We know. I mean, it's obvious to anybody who's not an extreme partisan. And it's like sometimes maybe some ideas are kind of leaning more left, more right, whatever, or there's just all different types. But we kind of get criticized a lot for not taking a stand. Like you have to pick one side or the other.
Yes, all
That's
the
your
time.
only choice. We've dumbed down the complexity of the universe into these two choices. That's it. Pick. It's
Yes.
like so ridiculous.
Yes. No, it is. My gosh, I've gotten pigeonholed. So I think the best way that I see it sometimes is at the federal level, I'm probably more of a conservative. At the state level, I'm probably way more of a liberal. The reason being is I feel like at the state level, the governor is going to have more of an idea of what's going on a day to day
Yeah,
with
yeah.
my
It's closer
problems,
to home.
right, than Washington. So, and unfortunately, this isn't 1776 anymore. You can't have a government that completely stays out of everything. You do need a referee for certain aspects of day-to-day life. We're so
Right.
complex and big, and that's very anti-libertarian in that speak. And I've had libertarians on the show, but it's a little weird when you're doing it like that, because I'm like, people are like, oh, you support national health care. I'm like, no, I support if the people of the state choose a statewide system, and if that's what they want, that's fine.
Right.
I just don't believe that somebody in Washington who doesn't know that, let's say, Michigan has a higher lead issue because of a couple 100-year-old
Right.
pipes versus, I don't know, a new subdivision in Florida, right? Those
Right.
two medical needs, are different. So how can you have a one size fits all approach
Yeah. I
to
mean
such a
that's
complex country?
that's basically federalism. And when it works,
Yeah,
it's great.
we've
The
gotten away from it.
states kind of do their own thing for the most part, and you're right. The one size fits all mentality often doesn't work very effective. Creates a lot of other problems and inefficiencies. So,
Yeah.
but your page and your YouTube and podcast, you're not always political, right?
No, not
Am
all the
I
time. Most of the time, like probably 60-70% political. And I know that other 30-40% sometimes can kind of, in the algo's eyes, bite me in the butt. But the one thing I refuse to do is not be me. I'd rather fail at what I'm doing and be myself and change direction
all right?
overall than be somebody I'm not.
All right. And that's probably, just a little variety. I
Oh,
mean, it
yeah.
just kind of makes sense. I mean, why would you have to talk only about one thing all the time? I mean, just kind of mix it up, I guess. Makes
I've
sense. I
had
think.
some mental, like a lot of mental health people on there, like I want to say like they're not men's rights advocates, but they're more of masculinity. How do you make masculinity work in today's modern age? I have people on there like that because a lot of people struggle with mental health these days. I mean, they get
Yeah.
burned out, especially in political. I mean, God, in politics, they call it burnout, right? They're checked out. I've got a show that I'm working on for Gen Z that I haven't released really yet. That's called Opted Out, because a lot of them, they've opted out because they don't feel, even if you're socialist or far right, far left, like you're not going to do anything no matter what I do.
All right.
Like I could give you every dime I have in my bank account across America, and you're still going to tell me you're going to address a problem, and then you're going to take my money and act like you've never heard of me before.
All right.
And I've heard that from, I've got a 16-year-old. I've heard that from so many of his friends where they're just like, why
Yeah,
participate?
there's a disconnect there. I'm in education, and so I deal with 17, 18-year-olds a lot.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of issues. Let's a disconnect. A lot of them don't see the system working for them. Their trust is low. They're cynical. There is a lot of anxiety. There extreme apathy. It's a tough situation, and how could you hardly blame them?
No, I don't.
Things are so, I could only imagine growing up in these past decade or two and just how things have been on the socio-political, area. It's like, man, it's just messed up.
Yeah, and the younger generation is, to me, I think one of the most, like, probably 16 to 2022, one of the most misunderstood generations there is out there. Because the problem is, like, if you want to call it the woke, and I'm not trying to be like woke, but that group of folks that identify that way seem to overcloud the rest of them,
Yeah.
because that's who everybody pays attention to. And a lot of them still do have pretty progressive views, to be fair. But a lot of them are kind of like, you live your life, I live mine, as long as you're not forcing it on me, and they kind of go on about their day.
Mm.
They don't really care too much. There's certain ones that do, right? And that's where Gen Z and everybody else kind of get like in that little, it's a gray zone. And, I was talking to my son, and my son said, Dad, I love you, but you're always going to be in the 90s and 80s. And that's your world, but that'll never be my world. And I'm like, man, now I know how my dad probably felt. He's probably stuck in the 60s. And I'm over here like, oh, okay, well, I think of Ronald Reagan terms.
All right. Fair. Yeah. So, what are some maybe one or two kind of put you on the spot here? What are some key issues you think going forward that we really need to focus on more in terms of a broken system, trying to make things better? I talk about election reforms a lot, ranked choice voting, all different structural, systemic issues. But I also talk about sort of that socio-cultural aspect, just kind of changing hearts and minds, thinking about changing how we think about politics and government
Yeah,
and stuff like that. But
I'll,
what do you think are like maybe a top two that we really need to focus on and kind of try to get a hold
so
of?
I'll bring one up that I'm actually working for a small, like it's nowhere even near ready, but like a book on it is the 17th Amendment. Where it took the Senate from being appointed by the states.
Right.
I feel that that's where America went broke because now the state governments would force the federal government to be more in line with the rest of us.
Mm.
That when you look at what the legislation the House passes, it's a lot more relevant to how Americans feel. Or that, let me rephrase, not passes, but that House reps bring to the floor, try to. It's a lot more relevant of the everyday people. Whereas the Senate, pretty much, they need to put their NASCAR jackets on, because they have more sponsors than anybody. And so the 17th Amendment, if it was appointed by the states, and I get the purpose of why it was put in place, right? Because a lot of corruption, but it's a lot easier to expose corruption now than it was 107 years ago. And I feel like, hey, if we can get the states represented, we can get the budget back in line. And people are like, oh, well, you're going to have to cut benefits. I'm not even talking necessarily on that level. If the budget's in line, your dollar is going to gain strength, which means you're going to have an easier time buying groceries. You're going to be able to pay your bills. You're going to be able to go on vacation. What's hurting it is that. So I think a lot of problems in America go back to the 17th Amendment. Because it got rid of the core principles of federalism that allowed us to become who we were. Like it set up all those foundations and then they ripped it from it. And ever since then, when you look at it, it's just got more partisan. Every 10 years, there's a partisan, I call it a partisan jump. And now we're in the middle of, I call it the Great Flip 2.0, where populism is going to the right but it kind of flipped on the issues, and a lot more people view the right as more pro-worker than they do the left now. Which in our younger days, nobody would have ever said that. They'd have been like, oh no, the right, they care about the rich. They don't care about us. And now they're kind of going, well, I'm a little bit south of Detroit, about 20 minutes. So one of the big things I think we really need to focus on is, and where I had a little bit of support the president, is tariffs. Not to the degree that he went, but free trade is only free trade if the other person you're trading with is at least in some degree near your par. Because there's no way that you or I would ever be able to compete with a Chinese worker for whatever we do. Never happened. When I was young, there was factories all around, and as soon as NAFTA was passed, within 5 years, probably half of them were closed. And it really gutted the state, and before that, companies were able to make huge profits, record profits for back then. They were able, and people had jobs, they had good jobs, and those things are gone. So it's kind of like I try to balance that. All right, we don't want to go too far with a tariff, but at the same time, China has taken advantage of us significantly. And that federal issue, to me, it bleeds down to the states a lot more than politicians want to admit. Those are probably the two things where I think of. The problem is they're not part of the 80-20 rule, right? In politics, where 80% of the people agree on this. So it's fractured because of the division. But if politicians are able to get people to take a step back and look, they'd realize that trade policy literally impacts your ability to have your job in 2 weeks.
Right.
How you're represented.
Yeah, and I think just in general, with everything, with the toxic dysfunction and just the government not very functional, right? The government not being able to address our problems properly and come up with solutions and just be in any way effective whatsoever. We've been floundering now for a good while. So it doesn't matter, you bring up some of the issues you think are important, other issues that are important, things that really need to be addressed. It's hard. It's hard when we're just, we're at each other's throat and everyone's just we're trying to tear each other apart, and all the demonization and vilification, stuff like that. It's hard to accomplish anything and have any sort of real legislative accomplishments or provide any sort of solutions or it's ineffective.
How do you
Totally ineffective.
How do you feel about Bill Maher?
Bill Barr.
I feel like Bill Maher's become the voice of reason.
Remind me who he is. You totally.
uh, he's he's a leftist comedian. Well,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
30
yeah.
years
Bill
ago,
Barr. Yeah,
leftist
yeah, I
comedian.
know that guy. He's pretty outspoken, and he was in The Mandalorian. Um,
Yeah, yeah, he's you know
yeah, and
I
maybe
like
Billy Corrigan's lost brother or something like that, right?
yeah, he's pretty hard left, but he's reasonable.
Yeah, he's kind of he does what he does. He's kind of a bomb thrower in a way, but I
Oh
like
yeah.
kind of how he'll shut people down. Like media will ask him questions, and he's like, "Why are you asking me? I'm not an expert on this." He's got an interesting take on things, though, for sure.
Yeah, I love the fact that he had John Fetterman on there. John Fetterman is like the ultimate centrist. Even though he has left views, he tries to go, and I agree with him 1,000%. Is why do you want to watch the president fail so America can fail? He goes, that makes no sense. And I'm
Yeah.
like, to me, that should be a duh. Like, that should just be a given.
It's hard for me to have like a strong opinion on someone like Fetterman because I don't follow it that closely. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
know he's a thorn in the side for the Democrats and he's very independent minded, which automatically I'm like, cool, we need more people like that, right?
Yes.
But I don't follow the day to day, for being sort of a political website and all that stuff. Just like the retail day to day political grind doesn't attract me. It doesn't do
It
it
can
for
cause
me.
burnout.
Yeah, well, yeah, totally. You get lost, you get caught up in that, and it just consumes you. And
Yes.
I feel like and politics is inherently corrosive, and it just infects everything. And we politicized everything. I come at it through more of an academic. My background is more like constitutional theory, political philosophy. So I'm like big picture. And when I get a little bit too much into the day to day stuff, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, first of all, it just bores the crap out of me to a certain extent. But it's just so, I don't know, man. It's
See
unsavory.
now, I want your from the educational background. So this is a question I want from you because this is something that I'm wrestling with my book, where the executive branch started taking on more of an empirical role,
All right.
and I'm okay with what this gentleman did. Let me Abraham Lincoln,
Yeah. Well,
that, and
that
I'm
was
okay with it, but
that was an
it opened the door.
anomaly.
Yeah.
When you look at the growth of presidential power, there's a variety of factors, obviously. First of all, presidents tend to be assertive, right? That's their personality. They're always pushing the
Mhm.
boundaries, trying to get away with whatever they can. And
Oh
once
yeah.
a president sort of gains those informal powers, they don't go away, right? The next president's not going to say, "Hell, oh, no, I don't have that power. I can't do that," right? So it only grows in one direction. So president, but the main reason, really, I think, is you got emergencies and crises, and presidents don't want to be seen as flat-footed. They're going to jump in and expand their powers. I'm not trying to be cynical here and saying they're going to invent things like that so they can gain power, but it's just natural that that would happen over time, right?
Oh yeah.
But I think a lot of it is just congressional delegation. The Congress passes laws after laws, dozens of laws, hundreds of laws, thousands of laws over hundreds of years. And every time they do that, they're giving the executive more power. They pass a law,
Yes.
okay, president, carry it out, and so it grows and it grows and it grows. And so this congressional delegation is just, I think that's probably the biggest factor. And just them, and they could push back. They could push back with
Easily.
Trump, with presidents from the past, and they have to some degree here and there, but not much. They could, but they don't. They allow it. It's really, I feel like it's Congress's fault for the main part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is without that they don't assert their authority. I don't know if you noticed in the a lot of the Supreme Court decisions, probably the last year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. But one thing I have seen a noted pattern is them going, "We're not going to litigate, tell Congress to do its job, and they kick it back."
Yeah, yeah.
And I have noticed that a lot where they're going because there's been a lot of pushback in Congress. Oh, they're litigating from the bench. Okay, no problem. Go do your job,
Huge
and we'll
job.
stop doing it for you. And then Congress
Well,
goes, "Oh, they won't make a decision."
well, that's the problem. Over the past few decades, I kind of see as the '90s as kind of being our tipping point where we kind of fell off the wagon. But
Yeah.
over the past few decades, Congress, it's about building your brand. It's about permanent campaign. It's about,
Yes.
it's actual legislative accomplishments, actually working together and for the common good, or compromising and actually trying to achieve real accomplishments in Congress. that's not the goal anymore. It's like an arena for the partisan tribes to fight, and it's just so dysfunctional and ridiculous. And they've completely lost the plot. I mean, Congress
Uh,
is a disaster.
I like to use the framing of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. Bitter political enemies, but I believe was it once a week or every something like that. They had dinner
Yeah,
together and a beer, and
yeah,
even despite being political enemies, because of that, he was actually able to get things done with a Democratic Congress. That today they would be like, you'd have protest, borderline riots if they were trying to accomplish things on that level. And
yeah. Oh, we saw you talking to those people. Why were you over there? Why
yes,
were you talking? We're gonna cut your funding. We're gonna cut your PAC money. We're not gonna give you the cool committee assignments. In so many ways, it's just completely broken. The rules in the legislatures are broken, and it's so dysfunctional. It's ridiculous. And a lot of the people when they leave, I'm trying to think of a couple names, but like Ben Sassy and some other ones, when they leave Congress, they all say the right things. They all say it. Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. We can't get anything done. There's like four people in Congress that control everything, and we just have to kind of toe the line. And they don't say it while they're there, but once they're out, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's terrible. Oh, it's like, well, yeah, no kidding."
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
We need a lot more people to kind of have the courage to kind of step away from the team sport aspect of things and get out. I call it the corrupt rig duopoly. We gotta just get out of that mold. It's just killing us. Yeah. So, well, thanks for being here to touch base. It's good to talk to you. Good luck to you, and well, me
you
and
too.
all of us in this fight against the extreme partisanship and the polarization, and just trying to strengthen that sort of middle ground aspect of our civic culture. So, middlegroundmic.com and the YouTube page. People can go check that out. And thanks again, Joe.
Appreciate it. Thank you.